Have you ever wondered why so many seemingly brilliant organizations just fail? I mean, it's often not because their product is bad or their team is untalented. It's usually because they completely ignore the world around them. They build this massive fortress, close the gates, and pretend the outside world doesn't even exist. But out there, it's a jungle. Welcome to today's Explainer, which is essentially your survival manual for the modern business jungle. We're going to look at the powerful, often invisible forces that surround every enterprise and decode exactly how the most successful companies navigate them to stay alive and really thrive.
Here's our map for today's Explainer. We'll kick things off with Welcome to the Jungle, then step inside your business walls before checking out the immediate battlefield and exploring the macro environment. Finally, we'll cover your tools for survival and wrap up with the globalization challenge. Let's dive right in.
Section 1. Welcome to the jungle. To really understand business, we kind of have to stop picturing static brick-and-mortar buildings and start picturing a living, breathing organism dropped into a highly complex ecosystem, constantly fighting to survive. Now, to survive, this organism absolutely has to understand its environment. According to our source material, the business environment is defined as all the external forces which have a bearing on the functioning of the business. These forces are what create either incredible opportunities or, lethal threats. Think of it like a massive, intricate web of conditions, socioeconomic, technological, governmental, that basically form the setting where a firm has to make its decisions. And the scariest part? Because these forces are external, they are usually completely out of the company's direct control. So, that brings us to an incredibly important question. Does a business operate in a vacuum? Absolutely not. No way. Our source highlights this really cool principle called mutuality. It's a two-way street. Yes, the environment constantly exerts massive pressure on the business, but the business, in turn, also influences certain aspects of its environment. They're constantly pushing and pulling against each other. Section 2. Inside your business walls. Because before you go out fighting external forces, a business has to get its own house in order. This is the training ground, and it's the one place where they actually have direct control over their destiny. These are what we call your controllable internal forces. We're talking about things like your ownership structure, your human resources, your financial position, and how well your departments integrate. Notice the chain reaction here. It's super interesting. A strong financial base gives you the muscle to hire highly competent humans, right? And those humans are the ones who actually identify and exploit the external opportunities. Everything literally relies on this internal foundation. And a major part of this internal environment is organizational culture. Smirchich defines it simply as a system of shared values, beliefs, and norms. Basically, it's just the way things are done around here. A strong culture is a massive survival tool when it's aligned with your goals. But man, it can be a huge liability if it's pointing everyone in the wrong direction. Section 3. The immediate battlefield. All right, it's time to step outside those safe internal walls and meet the direct allies and the daily predators waiting for us. Welcome to the task environment. These are the direct action forces that interface with your organization every single day. We are talking about your customers, your suppliers, substitutes for your product, your direct competitors, and the local labor supply you're hiring from. Unlike the broader global environment, these groups have an immediate, tangible effect on your operation. They dictate your day-to-day profitability, your market share, and quite frankly, your daily survival. Let's ground this with a concrete example from the text. In the incredibly fierce luxury bus transportation sector in Nigeria, a company called ABC Transport managed to totally excel. How'd they do it? By turning customer service into a literal competitive weapon. They didn't just drive buses. They made sure their workers were highly organized, remarkably customer-friendly, and above all, intensely time-disciplined. They investigated exactly what their customers needed and delivered it better than anyone else. That's how you secure your territory on the battlefield. Now, consider another key force, substitutes. In the packaging industry, paper packages suddenly found themselves competing with polyethylene. Metal containers faced a massive, unexpected threat from plastic. Substitutes are usually born from technological innovation, and they can diminish a product's life cycle practically overnight. If you aren't scanning the battlefield for substitutes, you might find your entire customer base vanishing, moving to a product you didn't even realize was a competitor. So here's a question that kind of challenges old school business thinking. What happens when you rely on too many suppliers? Well, the old textbook logic was always to have multiple suppliers so you weren't dependent on any single one. But our source points out a major shift. In today's intense global competition, it's actually becoming more rewarding to maintain fewer suppliers. By giving a few suppliers larger orders, they get to enjoy economies of scale, which means cheaper prices for you. Plus, it puts you in a much stronger position to enforce really tough quality standards. Section 4. The macro environment. Now we're zooming way out to look at the broad, uncontrollable weather patterns that affect every single firm operating in the economy. To make sense of this macro environment, the source uses the acronym PECETEL. That stands for political, economic, sociocultural, international, technological, ecological, and legal factors. Now, no single firm can just stop inflation or alter a country's demographics or halt global tech innovation. Yet every single manager has to navigate these conditions. A change in government, a shift in what consumers value, or a new international trade standard, these apply to everyone. You either adapt to this weather or you get washed away. Let's look really closely at the E in PECETEL, ecological, because this has profound real-world consequences. The text points to the reality of the Niger Delta in Nigeria. When oil exploration leads to ecological damage, like spillages, it severely impacts the physical environment and the actual livelihoods of the host communities. This ecological distortion directly leads to social hostility and protests, which in turn violently disrupts the business operations of those oil companies. It's a stark reminder that failing to manage your ecological impact isn't just an environmental issue, it is a direct threat to your business's survival. Section 5. Tools for survival. Okay, if the environment is this unpredictable and dangerous, how do we fight back? Here's the actionable playbook. The survival process really comes down to 3 vital steps. First up, environmental scanning. You have to monitor the events happening around you, basically act like a radar system, constantly sweeping for data. Second is environmental forecasting. You take that data and you make informed projections about future conditions so you aren't caught entirely off guard. And third, you take that foreknowledge and move to step 3, interacting effectively with your environment. See, the crucial takeaway here is that managers are never just helpless. You have specific tactics to interact with these forces. You can use public relations to shape your image. You can engage in what's called boundary spanning, sending your sales or purchasing agents out to meet directly with stakeholders and influence their actions. You can lobby the government regarding policies, negotiate binding agreements, or even form strategic alliances, sometimes with your own competitors, just to gain an edge. And hey, if the external pressure is too intense, you might have to engage in organizational restructuring to lean down and stay competitive. The point is, you have tools, you just got to use them. Section 6, the globalization challenge. All right, it is time to face the ultimate final boss of the business environment, the entire planet. The explainer source defines globalization as the integration of a country's economy with the world economy, driven by incredibly fast-paced communication tech, mass migration, and drastically reduced transportation costs. The whole world is essentially merging. A truly globalized corporation, they don't even differentiate between a domestic market and foreign markets anymore. They view the entire Earth as one single, highly competitive arena. But make no mistake, this global arena is brutal. While it opens up incredible international markets, the text stresses that it also creates intense, sometimes devastating competition for firms in less developed countries, who suddenly have to fight off these incredibly well-endowed global giants. We're seeing a massive rise in mergers and acquisitions as poorer, weaker firms just get swallowed up. To survive this, modern managers have to develop intense cross-cultural awareness. You aren't just managing local employees anymore. You're managing in culturally diverse settings and competing on a strict global standard of quality. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought. If a disruption in global shipping can bankrupt a shop right on your street, and if international tech can invent a substitute for your homegrown product tomorrow, well, in a truly globalized world, is there even such a thing as a local business anymore? Every single business, no matter how small, is part of this massive, interconnected jungle. Understanding that environment isn't just some academic exercise. It is the fundamental rule of survival. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep your eyes on the horizon.